Hey everybody, thank you for joining the Moonbeam Community Voice event. I'm Siko. My friend here is Thiago. We're here to discuss the new revised grant program that was recently voted in by the community. So I think for the purpose of this call, we're going to have kind of three main sections. So first, I'll explain a little bit about the ecosystem grant process. And then I think, Thiago is going to lead a panel with, sort of four, members of the Moonbeam community to sort of discuss, sort of different ways of looking at the various proposals. And then we'll finish up with a demonstration of the snapshot vote. So, so before we get started, I kind of want to, say a couple of words about, the grant program itself, right? So the grant program, I mean, it's a crucial part for helping to build out like the Moonbeam ecosystem. So not only does it bring in new users, it brings in new development teams. It increases transaction volume. It also fosters innovations and development. It allows teams to build and grow new use cases, and it also just generally drives community engagement. I think sometimes these conversations get somewhat passionate, but I think it's good to remember that passionate discussion is actually a sign that the Moonbeam ecosystem is alive, that it's healthy, that it's well, and that the community is very engaged in the future and the success of the entire project, right? So keep that in mind. So basically, in terms of the new process, so as part of referendum 87, which was passed, I think about a week ago, there's this new ecosystem grant program, right? That replaces what was previously known as the level 3 grant program in the interim grant program, in which preceded this for the previous 6 months. So, ecosystem grants in this new system, they range in size from a minimum of 250,000 Glimmer to a maximum of 2 million Glimmer, and the community has a direct say in a direct vote in who actually receives those grants. The budget for the entire for the 6 month period of the ecosystem grant program is 9 million Glimmer, and that's divided into two tranches. So there's a 4.5 million for the first half, 4.5 million for the second half, and each tranche aligns to about 3 months. So one big change compared to the previous program, and the previous program was kind of first come first serve. So whoever got their proposal in first, they kind of had a chance to get a vote going right away and have people vote directly. I think we sort of listened to feedback and sort of how the community reacted to that. I think this time around, I think the proposal was to kind of change this a bit, right? So that there's sort of a time period where everybody can get their proposals in, and so that the community has a chance to kind of evaluate all of these in parallel and side by side, and then sort of decide the outcome. So all projects have submitted their draft proposals in time, and so the ones that were eligible, those will be forward to the community to decide via a snapshot vote how to allocate the first 4.5 million Glimmer in the first tranche. So the start of the community snapshot vote is now, like it's live, like right this minute, started at 11, and it will be live for 5 days. So people have 5 days to vote. We're using a weighted snapshot vote, so it allows the community to decide how those tranche grant funds are distributed. And we'll give a demo at the end of this call, so people actually kind of know where to go and like what the voting process looks like and how to connect their wallet and all that. But I do want to kind of outline a couple of aspects of the snapshot vote. So it's a weighted vote. So when you vote, you decide by weight with your Glimmer how the funds should get allocated. You can essentially say, okay, I want X percentage to go to this team, X percentage to go to that team. And then obviously all those results get aggregated, and then it's the total aggregate vote from the community that actually determines the distributions. For example, if you think that only two teams should get tokens, then you would vote with 50% of your tokens for one and 50% of your tokens for the other, and then that gets sort of added up with everybody else's vote. Remember that you can use both staked and unreserved Glimmer, but all of the Glimmer must be in your wallet, or should have been in your wallet at 11. So basically, if you now start transferring tokens in, that's too late. Like it looks at the specific block when the vote was launched to kind of keep a fair process. So after this snapshot vote completes in 5 days, then the grant committee, which that's Thiago, that's me, that's several members from the community, we will make any required adjustments. So as I said at the beginning, there's this minimum of 250,000 Glimmer. there's a maximum of 2 million. It is of course possible that the community in aggregate decides to like give all of the tokens to like one team. I mean, that's probably a fairly extreme example, but we want to kind of keep these like lower and upper bounds so that it sort of gives a chance for multiple teams to benefit, right? So and so there's a lot of adjustments here, but basically like we'll like a lot of nuance here, but basically we'll make those necessary adjustments if there are any funds that kind of go over or under are considered leftover. If the total leftover funds after the community votes ends up being more than 1.75 million glimmer, then we're going to do a do-over, because that sort of indicates that the community is kind of too divided and kind of don't have like a clear signal, right? So if a team gets more than 2 million glimmer, that's also considered a leftover. And then at that point, the committee will then update the proposals, kind of confirming like what the final amount was that each project team received. And then at that point, it will be an on-chain vote. So the snapshot vote kind of is to kind of get the signal from the community as to how the funds will be distributed. We will then have we'll get all that information. We'll then have a single on-chain vote where everybody will get a chance to vote again to like to propose to confirm that proposal, basically. That on-chain vote is scheduled for March 27th, and then voting will close on April 3rd. And so, in principle, the the first tranche of the ecosystem grant will be distributed like right after, basically. So yeah, I think that's kind of the general overview of the grant program. I think I'll turn it over to Thiago to start the conversation with the panelists.
Thank you so much, Zico. And first, it's a pleasure to be back here. In the past years, to be like the Moonbeam universe, and now we are talking about the ecosystem grant. What an exciting time! When we start to think of all the upgrades, all the new features that we incorporate into this grant program, compared to the other one, we are always evolving, and it amazes me the amount of efforts that the team put in, to make sure that we got like one of the best like one of the best layouts and methods out there. So I think that's an amazing, achievement that we had. We're gonna have four panelists here today. So Jimena, I think you're gonna add them to the chat.
You got it. We'll see you then, Siko.
All right, see you in a bit,
Thank you,
guys.
Zico.
Yep.
Okay, pulling everyone up.
All right. While Jimena is inviting everybody to join. Let me introduce the panelists we're going to have today. So, first, we're going to start with Jake. He is a protocol program manager at Gauntlet and a lead risk management partner for Moonwell. We have Cicada, which is a CEO and core developer of BrainDex, a dot summa forward DAX aggregator, as well as a core developer of the Neon Crisis NFT collection. And a contributor to the Remark EVM smart contract system, which I'm a big fan of it. MadCripto, Mateo, everybody knows Mateo, founder of to do the crypto web education platform and content creator as well. Teriyaki Don is the co-founder of Crypto Discover and a Polkadot ecosystem enjoyer. So, guys, first of all, welcome to this panel. I think we're gonna have like an amazing discussion today. And the way we're gonna set it up, because we have a short time, is that I'm gonna address, some of the questions, specifically to one or two folks, and then move to the other questions for the other ones, and we keep going like this. Okay. So maybe you can start with like a very, like a very I would say like a very I don't know. It's an interesting question. Like it's maybe there's no right or wrong, but I like to hear your thoughts. Each chain has a different view on how they should use those big ecosystem grants, right? Some use for strictly R&D and develop the new projects, and some use to maintain and grow their ecosystem. I believe we, like with our grant program, we somewhat cover both, but I would like to hear from you guys. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, what is the best use of big grants like this, for the ecosystem as a whole? Maybe Matt, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I definitely think grants are really important, especially with these ecosystems that are really young still. And I really like the focus on R&D and niche projects because we want to be on top of the innovation. So most chains are copying what other chains are doing. I think when you really break through and make a really interesting innovation and are the first in doing something, I think that attracts users to the ecosystem. So I think grants, especially Moonbeam's focused on these two niches, these two things, I think it's really important, and will eventually bring more and more users that are looking for things that you can only do on Moonbeam, right?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Teriyaki, you have the same thoughts as Matt in this one?
Yeah, so I think for the larger grants that we're talking about, over $250,000, I think we should be targeting these grants towards projects that are mostly already built, right? Like I don't think these kind of grants are suitable to fund all of the development of a project, right? I think the projects that are applying for these grants should mostly be built. Maybe they need some help with audits. They need some money for that. We know audits are expensive. That makes sense. But I think like primarily these projects should be almost ready to launch, and then these grants act as a booster, to onboard liquidity, onboard users, and things like that to really boost them towards product market fit. I think is kind of the key idea. So it's kind of the opposite that we see on Polkadot and Kusama. Like I think those grants are very much for funding development, whereas for Moonbeam grants is more about funding liquidity, bringing users, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean, I, I believe both of you are correct. Like we have to balance between those two, and I agree with Teriyaki. Like those big grants, like are very important for boosting the ecosystem. But yeah, those are good thoughts. I mean, I don't know if there's a right or wrong. There's also always opinions about this, and it's interesting to see that both of you understand the need of both use cases, right? So if we go to the next one, I guess ecosystem grants are mainly used for, like boosting those ecosystems. Just a second. Yeah. So sorry guys, there's been a lot of discussion about concentrating the grant into one dex or pulverizing into several dexes, right? It seems that both options have some pros and cons, right? And we know that it's this was an ongoing discussion since the first grant. Maybe Cicada, you can give your thoughts on this. Like what are your thoughts on, like should we pulverize the grants into several dexes? Should we concentrate in one or two? Is there like a best approach in your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Just can everybody hear me all right? Just want to make sure my mic is okay. Great.
Yep.
So the answer to, or I believe, answer to a question like that, like the answer to any good question is it depends. I think particularly is that there are trade-offs to supporting one dex versus supporting a multitude of dexes. Security is a trade-off, absolutely. Like we saw with the Nomad hack. Even if a dex itself is secure, if all of the liquidity that dex has, or not all, but a large portion of the liquidity that dex has is tightly tied to a specific token that has an issue, then if you support that dex directly, or if you funnel all of the grant money into that dex and there's a problem, your wider ecosystem has a problem. Whereas if you'd spread it out to begin with, you'd be a little more resistant to that type of thing. There's also the question of to what degree are individual dexes able to use that money effectively to bring users, bring TVL, etc. In my opinion, is that I think that there is value in spreading it out a little bit. There is value in putting it in one place. It's just a question of weighing the risks against the rewards, right? Putting it in one place means that you have higher capital efficiency generally, and higher, like, just it's more efficient to make swaps in general. But with the advent of aggregators and things like that, that's not as big of an issue. Generally, I think the bigger question is what are dexes doing with the capital to create sort of novel experiences? Are they just incentivizing and maintaining, or are they actually trying to create new experiences for users, new types of tools, new instruments, basically? And I think the latter is really the most interesting thing dexes can do, is the R&D element of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, right? And it's funny about how we have to make a decision, right? It's about dilemma that we have here, the trade-offs that you mentioned. That it's about security, concentrate. I understand all of this, and it's a really tough question, right? Jake, do you have the same thoughts? Like, what are your opinion on it?
Yeah, and can you guys hear me as well?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, Cicada took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. But there's a lot of different things that could be good for both options. Both have trade-offs, pros and cons. I would say if you look at chains like Ethereum, they've seen success from having multiple different DEX contributors, kind of finding different specializations. Like you see different DEXs that are good for blue chip assets. Some are good for tail end assets. Some are good for stable coins. And I think in the ideal situation, in my perspective, you do have multiple contributors who also have deep liquidity, allow for traders to liquidate lending protocols successfully, and each chain kind of pushes each other to be competitive and innovative. With chains like Mua, which are more of a growth chain, I think just like Cicada said, like liquidity is probably the biggest and most important growth metric, in the sense that you want traders and users to be able to make trades, provide liquidity, and have a good LP experience, as well as be safe. So what you don't want to see if there are multiple DEX partners is that there's shallow liquidity from different partners, and there's a kind of a bad user experience for any new user who might want to use the Moonwell chain. I also liked what Cicada said about security risks, because as some people know, Gauntlet is the risk management provider for a lot of DeFi protocols. So we have a focus on risk, and I think there's different risks when you think of multi-DEX providers versus one DEX provider. So one thing that's good about multi-DEX is that you have kind of more than one point of failure. So as you guys have seen, different DEXs have different risks. Most of those being like Oracle or smart contract risks, technical risks. And when you have multiple DEXs with deep liquidity, you have the community able to rely on different partners to kind of stick around and support during times of urgency. In the other sense, I think in a perfect DeFi world, you have contributors who are providing to the community at a different values. So you want to see different DEXs basically supporting each other, and I think that's a strong thing. But I do think that for a Moonwell chain, I could definitely see the pros of having one DEX that has a lot of deep liquidity and provides a good standard experience for all users.
Yeah, like you guys were both talking about risks, right? About security, and I think that there's risk, which is the broader topic of security, right? When we think about security, we think about the hacks, we're thinking about the exploits. One point of security, like you guys mentioned, and this is one type of risk. It's funny because it's very hard for investors or for people, that wants to, go around in different dexes to measure those risks, right? Is How do you measure a risk of permanent loss in a lower TVL pool against a risk of hacks? I think those are very hard to measure, right? In the probability, the statistical type of things, and this is what maybe makes the discussion even richer, right? Because it's I don't know if there's a right answer. I don't think that we ever are going to be able to calculate this properly, because a risk of a hack is probably like 100% of impact of your funds, right? You have the other one that has probably a higher probability you have a lower TVL. So I mean, those are, I don't know if there's a right or wrong. I like what you both described, especially because I think this is one of our main core values, right? It's about security, it's making sure, like we are living crypto. We are actually like making decisions on crypto, and we don't have to think about the users, the final users. They don't have to think about like all those risks. Maybe this is um, this is a task for the protocols, right? That's what they have to do. So thank you both, for this explanation. I think that was pretty complete. So next question is that we basically requested the team to choose between two goals, right? All the teams. One is maintaining activity, and the second one was exploring innovation, connected contract use cases. Now, Moonbeam is positioning itself as a premier destination for interoperability of cross-chain messaging and more. Spending on R&D projects can be crucial, as investing on our ecosystem grow. um, what are your thoughts? Like when we think about those R&D projects, when we think about how Moonbeam is positioning itself in this cross-chain messaging interoperability, you guys already mentioned about the importance of R&D, but I would like to hear from you, Matt, first. Like what are your thoughts on on having this done, and focusing on R&D for the main vision of Moonbeam, which is this interoperability world.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's super important, right? I agree with Teriyaki that maybe bigger grants could take like the teams that have already built something, but I think uh, Moonbeam's still young. We're over a year old, and you can do many things that maybe you couldn't do 6 months before now, because we have been adding different tools and different projects have been deploying here. So I think it's really important to push people to test things and experiment, do this research with this vision of Moonbeam of connected contracts, so we can give a road to new breakthroughs that haven't been done before. I think that's very essential, like I said before, because a true breakthrough will definitely bring more users at the end. It's you can bring like the most known apps that already deployed everywhere else, but if you really bring something different, I think that can be something that will make a Moonbeam a hotspot for sure.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Cicada, any compliments to any additional thoughts to Matt
Yeah,
comments?
I'm mostly agree with that. Is that I think that maintaining activity is important. I think that measuring to what degree incentives maintain versus increase activity is a little difficult at the moment. Like I love statistics, and I've always, whenever I see these grant proposals and we go into the next round, I always kind of want to see more statistics on how the previous ones went, and I don't have time to compile those myself, unfortunately. So just more visibility on that. But rather that aside, I think that to echo is that R&D is super important, because that's what's going to help Moonbeam really sort of carve out its core competencies. That's what's going to help it develop relative to the other blockchains in the network and make it really competitive. Is that if we find what it can do better than all of the other networks and cross-chain connected contracts, if R&D in that zone, in my opinion, is probably the most important thing, just because what really kicks off networks and brings them into the big spaces are these killer apps, right? Just pushing more money into an ecosystem doesn't always do much. You can push tons of money in and then when there's higher yield elsewhere, whoever's been farming whatever those incentives are will move on. Whereas if you have a killer app that enables some kind of functionality that other places simply do not have, and it will be relatively difficult for those other places to develop the same thing, then you have retained users. And to me, that's the goal.
You touched on a very, very good point. It's about the long term, right? It's about the marathon, and not like having this initial sprint. Maybe again, it's of course we all understand the importance of those ecosystem grants for for growth, for bringing and boosting liquidity in the short term. But this is assuming like all the teams and the projects that we have, they have like you said, like killer app and features in there that is going to make a difference and want to make people like stay in our ecosystem. You both mentioned about like we talk about this R&D, the importance of R&D, and I couldn't agree more. And if we do like just a quick recap on the previous phase of the grants, of course we had the the old ecosystem grants where it's 100% focused on liquidity, but we also have the committee grants, that approved more than 30 different projects, more than 200 teams applied for those grants. So it's I would say that like from those teams, we had like a lot of thoughts and efforts put into R&D, and we as Moonbeam, as a community, I think we are like with the right, like our hearts and minds are in the right direction, to build the R&D, to build this long-term vision. So thank you both, for those comments. I'm sure it was um, it resonates to our larger community. So maybe on that subject, I think Cicada touching this point of making sure like we have like making sure that the grants are being correctly used and the right approach. As a community member, how do you evaluate those teams? How do you evaluate? How you decide? Like what is the percentage that you should allocate for each project, or which project is the best or should receive incentives? Do they maybe another question is like, do they all need to be doxed? Do they need to be like, we need to know who they are, like who is the team behind, or is it okay to be unknown? Like we had this crypto phase like 3 years ago, everybody was unknown and this was a thing. Nowadays more and more people is getting KYC'd by the community, so we know who you're dealing with. But is it okay? What it's I would like to hear your thoughts. Maybe we can start with Teriyaki.
Yeah, sure. I think so. Anonymous teams are always fine. I think as long as they're like docked to the foundation as they currently are, right? That's the way that it currently works. They dox themselves to the foundation.
Absolutely. So most of the teams, all the teams actually that received the grant was KYC'd, or in some point in time. But I think is the matter like so first of all, like, they are KYC, but the question is more towards, should they get like, should the community knows who they are behind the scenes, maybe a LinkedIn profile type of thing, so they are like they know like the accomplishments that those teams had in the past.
I think we've seen great projects come from anonymous teams, right? Like currently you have like GMX, you have Sushi Swap, although who knows what they're doing these days. You have Bitcoin, obviously, like that's a big one. So of course I think it's good if the team does have public faces, and it's kind of ironic coming from me since I'm semi-anonymous, but if you're asking for funds from a treasury or from an ecosystem fund or something like that, you need to build trust with the community. It's kind of a good idea to have a face behind your project, but you can also like build up a brand or build up a reputation as an anonymous person. Like I'm Teriyaki Don, and I have a history, and you can have a history as an anonymous person, although it's much easier to do it if you have like a real face. So I think both is okay. Yeah.
Okay, but give me another thoughts about like how you make a decision over those teams. Like it's okay the discussion between docs and anon, but let's put that apart. Like how do you make decisions over those projects? Like they apply, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 amazing projects. Give us some examples of criteria that you use, like that you think it's important to the community to have in mind.
Yeah, I think like if they have online history under that persona, so like if they have a GitHub, if they have a Twitter account, if they've been with projects before, that's always a really good start. Projects that are just like a brand new anonymous account is very, very difficult to get behind. There's no they don't really have any history that you can like decipher anything from. So I think it's always a good idea to have a little bit of history around your anonymous character. It's always good. I think that's kind of how I do it. Like, what have they done in crypto in the past on Twitter, on GitHub? What do they claim, and what can I research, and what can I ask them? Like, if I ask them questions that they should know, do they know the answer, or do they kind of like hesitate or defer to someone else? You can kind of tell if someone's telling the lie or telling the truth to an extent in crypto.
I think that's an amazing thought. I mean, you have to be a great, do your own research type of guy, right? And know like what you have to look for. But you touched on two very important subjects, which is knowing the history of the team. Sometimes it can be unknown, but they can have like a history, right? They can have like all the data behind them that substantiates like what they're doing now, and it gives some confidence. Like you said, like if Satoshi somewhat appeared again and say like there's I have a new thoughts on Bitcoin. Everybody's gonna listen. Everybody gives importance because it's important to the community, although he's a non. And the second one is the quality of the answers. I really like this one too because it's about you asking the questions and making sure the team is responding what you believe is the right thing to hear. Sometimes you don't know the answer, sometimes you do know the answer. So I think both are valid, right? Sometimes you have to ask the questions just to make sure the team is, you know, they are competent enough to answer those questions that it should be in their thoughts since they are living it like 100% of the time. Matt, do you have similar thoughts? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I definitely have similar thoughts. I think past activity or achievements for the team or a specific person is important. Maybe they built in Web 2, nothing in crypto, but that could be a good sign, like a GitHub or relationship with other crypto projects. If they have maybe founded before other projects, tried to found them, or just collaborated in some project. I think either doxed or not doxed, both can be successful, but definitely being anon adds a little more risk. Maybe at the end, some people don't find enough information, and we've seen it happen in the Polkadot ecosystem. Maybe a team member gets doxed, and he doesn't have the best reputation, so that literally, even if they are building something interesting, can just like bring down the whole project because of what a team member has done in the past. So I think I'm a little bit more for the docs teams, but I definitely agree that both teams can both kind of teams can live on. I think Satoshi is a good example, but there was not a lot of greed back then. He was the first to do it. Now everybody wants to build and cash out quickly, so that can be dangerous, I think.
Yeah, and I think our thoughts were into it because when Satoshi created Bitcoin, right, it is really like an open source, like the argument that wasn't supposed to change. That was like everything predicted. I think nowadays the projects are getting more and more sophisticated in this way that like it gives the team some flexibility to do some changes, some upgrades on the smart contract. And I think all of this, like the code is law type of thing. I mean, code is law, but law can be updated apparently. So like this gives some I think the community likes to see some more like likes to see the person behind, or even if it's unknown, like like Teriyaki mentioned, it's about like you look in their records and see like what they did in the past, like is that trustworthy. Yeah, so those are very good thoughts. Those are very good thoughts. Thanks, you guys. Last but not least, we have one final question: is how do you measure success? Like what metrics can we use to say yes? You know what? Like this grant program worked. Like this team used the grant and actually came out of it like way better. Like it achieved the goals. We made sure like to ask all the teams to put some tangible metrics in there, so we are a little bit better to see like if they reach those metrics. But I'd like to hear from the community, like what is like that we gonna look back and say, like beyond the metrics, is that are there like more metrics that we should add in? And if we remove the metrics, is there like a intangible way to analyze, like abstract way to analyze that those teams were like delivered to the expectations? Maybe we can start with you, Jake.
Yeah, sure. I think it's very important to kind of lay out success criteria and make sure that the community is aligned on that criteria. So definitely align with everything you're starting with, Tiago. I think the first thing I'll verify or validate is that, coming from Gauntlet is really a data science company at heart and data analytics. So we love, just like Cicada was mentioning, just data. The best thing I could say is like you guys are on the right track of, which is just to quantify everything, provide as much data, both of historical success, so how these contributors have been monitoring their success in the past and how they will continue to do so. If you can quantify as many things, even if it's qualitative things, and you add like random point scales, I think these are good ways to measure success and make sure people are aligned with what a 10 out of 10 means versus a 5 out of 10. I think another good aspect of kind of making sure that your success is aligned with the community is one thing Gauntlet tries to do as well, is to kind of continuously report on that success. So you shouldn't just be putting out, your success metrics at the beginning, and then as the program goes along, you're kind of quiet, and then at the very end, you report that as well. I think it's really important to kind of continuously keep on the pulse of the community, have people check in and give feedback, make sure that the big stakeholders of the community agree that your program is going successful, or to what degree it's going to successful. Another good tool that we use in Gauntlet internally, which I think is kind of beyond the quantifiable metrics, which I know was one of your questions, Tiago, is to kind of, we use user stories, not just for product and marketing decisions, but also like if you're thinking of this from the DEX perspective of Moonwell, you want to put yourself in the shoes of the different users, right? So that's an LP provider, that's a trader. And I want to, an example user story might be like, as an LP provider or as a trader, there's enough liquidity on this DEX that I can complete my trades and not have to switch to a different, protocol. So I think putting yourselves in the shoes of the people who are using your protocol, the people who are affected by your grant proposal, is a good way to measure that. And then as the program goes along, you can kind of check back in and say, do we achieve the user stories that we wanted to?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good thoughts. Teriyaki, and what about you? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think I'm a simple guy. So, I want to see user growth. I want to see TVL growth. Especially for projects that are, doing liquidity incentives, there need to be some TVL growth, from that. So, of course, measuring is tough. It kind of depends on the market to an extent, but if you can kind of measure TVL growth in Glimmer terms, like how TVL used to be counted on Ethereum is in Ethereum Ether terms. So I think looking back at the first round of grants that happened, the Stellar and Moonwell, do we think that was successful? I think to an extent, Moonwell was quite successful. They haven't needed to come back in this round of grants to ask for another batch. They've mentioned that they might in the future, but that's another story. They managed to not use all the tokens. They've grown the TVL significantly. They maintain that TVL. So I think, we can say that Moonwell was successful in the previous round. I think that would be fair to say. Stellar, it's hard to say exactly. I'm not trying to throw shade at them, but they're pivoting their product from a V2 style AMM to like a concentrated liquidity. So of course, that's a bit of a pivot. You're going to have to move the TVL to the new platform. So, it's hard to say if they're successful, but if they can continue to grow after this round of grants without needing more Glimmer from the grants program, then I think that's a success. Can they achieve liftoff? If they can, and they don't need any more incentives, then that's great. That's success to me. I
like this thought. It's about, so you bring it up like a new metric, right? So it's maybe intangible. It's like not asking for a grant again. It is tangible, but it's not numbers, right? It's like becoming independent. It's a metric.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It resonates to me again with what we said in the beginning about those ecosystem grants. They are to boost the ecosystem and to reach a level of independency. I don't know if it was Jake or Cicada that mentioned about the new features, a killer DApp, all those things that will bring the users and retain the users, right? So it's about not only bringing in the users, but actually retaining them. Yeah, that's a good thought. I always like to think as well as like we would analyze any like company in the stock market, like from any of those big players from Tesla, Apple, doesn't really matter. Like you look at the numbers, of course. So that's what we do with the ecosystem grants. We're trying to do, having like those tangible metrics and making sure like those are achieved according to the goals of each project. But also we have to do this this fundamental analysis on each project and fully understand, to each extent, like how successful they were in this period. Yeah, so like this was a very interesting conversation. That is pretty much for me. Maybe we, since we just have a few minutes left, maybe Matt, do you have any thoughts on this, on how you measure success?
Well, yeah, it's I think like Teriyaki put it really well. If they can live independent of grants, I think that's a great sign for sure. And attracting users, I think daily active users, I think it's a really good measurement of how attractive and useful that app is at the end, or fun, or whatever they're trying to achieve. So hopefully these grants can help bring those active users into Moonbeam and retain them for sure.
All right. Yeah, good guys. First of all, I really like to thank you all for, participating in this panel, in the discussion. We are always evolving in crypto. 6 months, it's like interstellar movie, like looking for Murphy and spend like 30 years and get lost. So I mean, we are always evolving, and we learned so much from the last 6 months. And I guess like we actually evolved with this grant program, and we're going to continue to evolve. And these discussions are really meaningful, to understand, like where we heading and measuring success, like you guys said. So thank you so much again, one last time, and see you guys shortly. Make sure to vote and do all the stuff. We do gonna continue here. I think Jimena, we're gonna have Cico back, I believe, or
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Thank you guys for the panel. It was great. I'm pulling you off the screen and I'm pulling Seiko up.
Will do.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. We'll pull Seiko up.
There we go. That worked. Excellent. So first of all, just want to again, sort of similar to Tiago, like just thank the entire panel, like MadCripto, Teriyaki Don, Jake, Cicada. I think just excellent discussion. It's really good to see sort of this sort of breadth of opinion, and also just the very thoughtful feedback that I think people are providing. I think it sort of shows the quality of some of the people that we are participating in the community, and I think it's just excellent. And also just thank you to you, Tiago, for excellent job as a host. I think that went really well. So I think in terms of the last point is kind of around the snapshot vote, right? So as I mentioned, the snapshot vote is live now. I think I actually just looked, and some people are already voting, so it's kind of exciting to see that. When you've been working on something for a couple of weeks, to then kind of see it, the thing come to life is kind of exciting, right? So I think we want to start with just kind of for those who've never done a snapshot vote, I think Kevin's here to kind of demonstrate what that looks like, and then I'll have some closing words at the end of that. So yeah, Kevin, go ahead, over to you.
Cool. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen. Let me know if y'all can see this. Cool. How's that?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. So for anybody whose first time is on Snapshot, Snapshot is a great way to vote. It doesn't use any gas. It doesn't lock up your tokens for any period of time. This includes during the Snapshot voting period. You vote, but your tokens are never locked. So there's no incentive or anything to wait until the end of the period. You can vote now, and there's no worries there. So I'm just going to zoom in just a tad. So hopefully this is a little bit easier to read. And you can see the link here for snapshot.org. You can go to the Moonbeam-Foundation.eth page. And there's a couple different ones. I think the first one that we started with was dynamic fees. The next one was a proposal here on remote EVM execution. And anytime you go into one of these, it's very important to read the whole post. And typically there's a corresponding discussion on the Moonbeam community forum. But this is a special type of vote. And the vote that we are talking about here is one that uses weighted voting. So it's not just a, B, C, choose one option, but you can choose actually as many options as you'd like. So Optionally, you can press join here. There's no requirement to join. You can vote actually without joining, but you may find it helpful to do that. You also want to connect your wallet here in the right-hand corner. It supports a ton of different options. So MetaMask is what we'll use today. And then you may not be able to see the pop-up, but you're just connecting the account that you'd like to vote with. And Snapshot does take into account any funds that you have that are staked on the Moonbeam network or locked in democracy. So those are considered. You do not need to unstake them. You don't need to move them or anything like that. So let's assume that we've read through the entire proposal, and we've also checked out each of these individual Moonbeam Community Forum links. I encourage you to check out each of these, for more information. Here under this highlighted discussion, we also have just a link to the grant proposal page, so you can find all of them there as well. So let's say that we've come to a decision, and for the purposes of this demo, I'll be allocating equal votes across all of these options. But one thing to point out here is what are you exactly allocating, right? You're allocating your voting power, right? And so what I mean by this is these numbers here that you're adjusting, the 1, let's say this is 2, this is 3, right? These numbers are they're made up numbers. They don't correspond to Glimmer. They don't correspond to anything. All they are points as to how you can allocate your votes. So the numbers that you are concerned with are these percentages. So this means that 16% of your voting power is going to this option, 16 is going to this one, et cetera, et cetera. So once everything looks good, you can tweak these and fine tune these as much as you'd like. There's no limit. You can fine tune them, very precisely. But yeah, as we said, we wanted to keep them all even for this demo. You can go ahead and press vote once you're ready. You'll need to agree to the Moonbeam Foundation terms of use. So go ahead and check that out. If everything looks good. Cool. And this is the final confirmation screen here. So you'll see your vote selection. You can hover over this and see the exact full list. You'll see the snapshot block number. You'll see your voting power. So if this looks way off, maybe you connected the wrong account. So you'd want to double check that. And then here you can optionally provide a reason for your vote. This is public, so be careful posting anything here. Once everything looks good, you can go ahead and press confirm. And you'll see a pop-up in MetaMask, and the pop-up will just prompt you to scroll to the bottom of the signature so you see all the data that you're signing. Then press sign. And that's it. Yeah, the vote is in. And also keep in mind that you're free to change your vote at any point during the voting period. So if something comes up later and you change your mind, you can always come back here and change it. So that's it.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Kevin. So yeah, so just a couple of closing thoughts here, right? So first of all, I think at the bottom of the screen, there's a link directly to the snapshot vote. So I do encourage people to go check that out. I think I would encourage people to read. I think in the description of the snapshot vote, there's these links to the forum threads for each of the proposals. We asked the teams to kind of provide a lot of material to substantiate their grant ask, and I think the teams have done that. There's been a lot of thought put into that. I think these teams worked really hard on their proposals. Excuse me. There's also been a lot of discussion, right? I think people have given feedback, they've asked questions. I think the teams have very thoughtfully kind of responded to those questions and asked and amended the original proposal in some cases based on that feedback. So I think I would highly encourage that people go check that out and kind of make an informed vote, right? And it's important that the community votes. I mean, I kind of want to stress that point, right? So it's important because for a number of different reasons. One, we are handing out a fairly sizable portion of the total token supply, and we want to make sure that the will of the community is represented in how that gets done, right? And I think by collectively voting, the community is really deciding the long-term future of the chain. And then I think it's also important that the core value proposition of Web3 is this decentralization aspect, right? The fact that it's sort of the wisdom of the crowds. And so I think I think that only works if people actually participate, right? So you need engagement, you need people to actually care about the proposals, and bother to spend the time reading them and then making a vote and so forth. And I think the last point I have is that if you think about this, right, from the perspective of somebody who has just heard about Moonbeam and is coming to look at the ecosystem and trying to learn about it, the sign of an active discussion, right? The discussion doesn't all have to agree. I think that's fine. I think it's totally fine for people to have sort of different opinions. But the sign that there's an active discussion, that the people are passionate about it, that they're engaged in the process, I think is a strong sign of a healthy community that people are interested in, that they care about, and I think to me is like a strong indicator of the success of a project, Moonbeam or otherwise. And so I think that's also, as a community, by participating in this vote and providing feedback and so forth, I think that's how we can signal to the outside world that hey, Moonbeam's real, like it's live, it's this is a great project to be, basically, right? So please go out and vote. And I think as they say in the sort of traditional democratic votes, and also encourage your friends and family to vote, right? So be very excited to see what plays out over the next 5 days. And yeah, that's it for me.
Me too. And thank you, Cico. Thank you, Kevin, for going through this. I guess this is pretty much it for our panel. Is there anything else left, Jimena?
I think we're all good, guys.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes. So again, guys, thank you everyone for for joining in. Like Cico said, make sure to vote, and put your votes in place. We are gonna look forward for it, and let's see how that goes. Again, guys, thank you so much, and have a great one.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.